want to start with you. What's your reaction to Barkley's comments there on Isaiah Thomas being emotional?
Well, he was ready to play, first of all, Isaiah Thomas. But you have to be so careful. I think I know what Barkley means. Still, you have to be so careful the way you phrase things when someone's family member passes, especially tragically. And my mind immediately went to the Todd Heap tragedy, and the headlines about Todd Heap everywhere were, and I apologize to the Heap family for even repeating this, I'm simply stating what the headlines were. Todd Heap accidentally, it's hard for me to even say, the tragic ending for his 3-year-old daughter. And I was getting angry at the headlines. Because in these situations, you look to blame. Your anger needs an object to take. And in the absence of something better, you can get mad at a headline writer or a pundit on television who's expressing something. You have to be so careful. Were I writing the headline about Todd Heap, for example, I would simply say something like, Heap family tragedy. And if someone was interested, they can click and read about it. But I found it distasteful and exploitative, even though I understand it's getting out information, to even put the details, even as many details as there were, in the headline itself, because it's such an excruciatingly tragic and painful moment for that family. And I had the same kind of reaction to Barkley saying what he said. I understand he was getting a point across, and Barkley, what makes him great on television is that he just tells you what he's thinking. But in this case, I would have liked to see a more careful filter because of the particular kind of level of pain it causes the family who you're talking about.
Yeah, Max, I can't make sense of what Charles is saying here. Now, I have the utmost respect for Charles Barkley as an independent thinker, as someone without a filter, and who does this, I think, very clearly, not in an attempt to get attention, anything he ever says, but in a searching attempt to find truth. I think that's what he was doing here. I think he was trying to find insight and truthfulness and telling us what he might have thought as a teammate. I just can't find where he's right in this in any way. Is he making his teammates uncomfortable? Is that what Barkley's saying? Is he uncomfortable with Thomas playing? I don't know. What I do know is this. There are many people who show up to work while going through personal hardships. Mm-hmm. Some, when it's tragic. I know that I've had that situation in my life, Max, and I know very well that you have had it yourself. Without trying to make a trite analogy, it's like one of those flashbangs that goes off in your life like they have in the movies. Everything goes numb. You can't, it's almost like you can't hear, you can't see, everything is boxed out except what just happened to you. And I just saw Isaiah Thomas do one of the most tough things that I can imagine, and that show up onto a basketball court and not just perform, but perform at the highest level. 33 points, shooting over 50%. You can have John Wall's performance this weekend as far as I'm concerned. You can have Draymond's. You can have any other performance from this weekend. I'll take Isaiah's. I will ride with Isaiah through this entire playoffs. A guy like that is the definition, the embodiment of toughness. And I don't know how in any way he could have made anyone uncomfortable. That team, this league, is better for Isaiah Thomas.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to point out that I think that Barkley made that statement prior to the game. So, in other words, Isaiah Thomas was about to play. Usually when you're televising a game, these guys are out on the court shooting and what have you, and the cameras are following them, showing footage of them practicing, prepping for the game. And you saw him sitting on the sidelines in tears, and Avery Bradley was the only one that had to go over to him because obviously they're friends because they grew up in neighborhoods near one another. I have not spoken to Charles Barkley about this. I do not know what point that he was making, but knowing Charles Barkley for years the way that I know him, I didn't take any offense to what he was saying. What I deduced from what he was pointing out was that to see the guy, your star player, in that state of mind, you're not saying it as a criticism. You're saying it's uncomfortable because you realize it's so devastating to him, you don't know what to do. And as players and as teammates, yeah, you have an obligation to go out there and perform. And your sister was not the one that died in a car accident, but you love him. And you know how devastating he is. And that in and of itself can end up being a distraction for you because you're actually watching him endure that. If you have a friend, if you have a loved one, and you're seeing them in the throes of that moment going through what they're going through. I'm not saying that's the word I would use, is uncomfortable or whatever the case may be, but I don't think it's something to be criticized for. I think it's one of, that's the way he decided to articulate himself. Keep in mind that he's on the air with the man himself, the great one, Ernie Johnson, who blessed us with his presence on the show. I was interviewing Ernie Johnson, and he was talking about his family. And there was a moment there where he just got silent because you could see he was holding back tears when he was talking about what's in his book. Well, my instant reaction was to be quiet and or to move on from that moment because you're seeing him uncomfortable at that particular moment. Or I was like, okay, I don't know what to do here. That's what I got from Charles Barkley. I got a guy that was a basketball player that was imagining himself in that situation with a teammate that's balling and he's devastated and he's going through just such pain, and you're wondering, my goodness, what do you do here?
Thank
and
you
that's
for
what it
highlighting
is.
that it was before,
Barkley,
though, because
yes.
that's a key point.
Barkley seems.
Go ahead, Max.
Barkley seems to have been expressing sympathy to me.
Yes.
I interpreted it as him expressing sympathy, like maybe this guy shouldn't be here right now. He's going through this enormous, this incredible adversity at the moment. But even in expressions of sympathy, at times like this, it's important to be careful, not in terms of like the civility of public discourse, but out of respect to the family because of what they're going through. Literally, I know you're putting 5 or 10 or 15 people, whoever's going through that in that family, 20 people ahead of the viewing audience. But yes, in those instances, I think you have to. You have to be so careful how you phrase things, even in expressions of sympathy.
I don't think he would have said it after the game.
Well, I don't think he would have said it after the game. But here's the important point that I wanted to point out. Max and I, we get into a debate every day, and Will's here, and we get into debates. But at our core, it's our obligation to protect one another. And what I mean by that is we can have differences of opinion all day long. But if you work with people and you know them, you know their heart. And so it might not have meant it. Like, he's on the set with Ernie and Kenny and Shaq, who articulated that he went through this himself. We have to trust that team. They're a great team. They're Emmy Award winners and all of this stuff for a reason. And when you have somebody as great as Ernie Johnson, if there was any kind of insensitivity, if there was any kind of inappropriateness that you felt that Charles Barkley was articulating, let's believe that Ernie Johnson would have definitely come back and asked a question or revisited it to make sure all bases were covered. You got to trust one another in that regard. That's a very important point to make, Max.
And also, I appreciate so much what you said earlier about just another level of respect for Isaiah and what he did going out there under these circumstances. Absolutely incredible, his heart.